Progressivism is just another leftist con. These days, leftists often use the word progressive to describe themselves because, as usual, the manipulation of language is a critical part of the left's attempt to trick people into believing that they stand for liberty. The left's objectives, however, will remain clouded in mystery until, of course, you're living in a police state, and then you'll damn well have whatever the leftist tells you to have, like it or not. But before that can come about, leftists are presently keen on using the label progressive to suggest that if you stand against them, then you're just another stick in the mud or a dinosaur because, you know, if you're against progress, then you must be some sort of Luddite. But much to the dismay of leftists everywhere, I'm going to shine a light on this verbal con with this video and show that progressivism is merely the latest in a long line of buzzwords repackaging old ideas. If your idea of progress is equal poverty and misery caused by central planners that steal the wealth of individuals and use it to live in luxury, or if it's got anything to do with a dictatorship that severely suppresses human nature, then you'll be okay with what progressives have to offer. Make no mistake, however, a progressive is just a plain old socialist, or if you like, you can call them a collectivist, though when all's said and done, you should call them a totalitarian. Why? Because leftists base their values on two things. A, absolute central control of all facets of social and economic life, and B, the denial of human nature based on the presumption that all human beings are completely malleable. It's because leftists believe that progress involves absolute central planning with no limits to authority that socialism and other collectivist ideologies all end the same way, totalitarianism. It's simply amazing that, after so many attempts, leftists don't understand why this pattern keeps repeating itself. And it's for this reason that it's so important that they keep repackaging the same old failed ideas with buzzwords like progressivism. It's also for this reason that communist and socialist revolutions the world over failed so catastrophically in the 20th century, though leftists keep trying to think up all sorts of ridiculous excuses for why socialism has always been such a disaster. This is so absurd that leftists are taught to parrot the claim that North Korea is a fascist state, or that the Soviet Union was state capitalism. This is just a desperate ploy to keep people from seeing that all the socialist revolutions in the 20th century failed because unrestrained central planning is basically impossible to carry out without corruption setting in. The reason is simple. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. The denial of human nature in particular is what this video will address, since the flaws of a centrally planned resource-based economy are written all over history. The denial and suppression of human nature, however, is still very much a part of the present zeitgeist. To truly be identified as a leftist, and no, you don't have to openly call yourself a leftist to be one, any more than someone needs to agree to being called a thief, you need to believe that there is no such thing as unalienable individual rights, because all rights are actually privileges granted by authority. By the same token, the leftist also believes that human nature is no barrier to social engineering. This is often theoretically described as a belief in limitless human potential, but in practice this results in complete expendability of the individual. In the past, mass famine and forced labour has resulted in the death of millions, wherever this terribly destructive belief goes unchallenged. This reality is, once again, written all over history, be it the famine that occurred during the Great Leap Forward under Mao, or the Gulag archipelagos of the Soviet Union. Progressives treat human beings like cogs in a machine. They believe that they can fit into predefined social and economic roles, and that science itself can prove how human beings easily adapt to environment. The first way they do this is by denying free will, because if all behaviour is part of some sort of predetermined path, then this means that central planners can predict outcomes. This is why leftists spend so much time regurgitating determinist sophistry that they've been conditioned to believe. But through praxeology, Austrian economists have shown that human behaviour is anything but deterministic, and that individuals will go out of their way to serve their own self-interests, ingeniously figuring out ways to bypass certain obstacles and restrictions. Even in the most authoritarian setting, this has been proven to be true, given that the Soviet Union had a large black market of illegal goods, in spite of severe punishment if caught buying and selling privately. Progressives will even argue that humanity is completely adaptable and undefinable because we are all part of nature, and thus all life constantly evolves from one form to the next. Yet again, this is pseudo-intellectual sophistry. While human beings are certainly part of the cycle of nature, evolution is anything but a rapidly developing process where life quickly transforms from one form to the next. In fact, the opposite is true. Evolution is slow and tortuous, where all changes are caused by accidental mutations that are, purely by accident, found to be advantageous in certain environments. Like all leftist sophistry, the case for adaptable and undefinable humanity is repackaged from one form to the next, so people don't realise that this is an old and refuted idea. Presently, this argument is very popular among transhumanists, who are essentially another group of leftists who believe they have the right and the capability to plan human evolution. But just like the free market, human evolution is not only a completely unplanned phenomenon, but also something that no human being should ever have the power to control, because like everything else, human beings do incredibly badly when given any sort of absolute power over natural behaviour. Another way to demonstrate how leftist beliefs have been repackaged into something that's essentially the same as the older version, but presented in a slightly different light, is the progressive stack. Put simply, this is the organisation of people in the order of who comes from the most oppressed group. Those coming from groups considered most oppressed are put to the top of the stack, while those that are least oppressed are put at the bottom. Therefore, if you're a black, disabled, lesbian, female, then you're put at the top of the stack. But if you're a fit, white, heterosexual male, then you're put at the bottom of the stack. This structure has been found among Occupy movement locations around the world, where stack keepers or facilitators designate speaking order during meetings. To the rational individual, this entire idea seems ludicrous, since logically any order should be either based on first come, first serve, or on categorization based on merit. In the equality-obsessed mind of the leftist, however, who is constantly moving towards a fantasy utopia where social constructs of human biology are allegedly eradicated, the progressive stack is the way that every part of society should function, whether it's taxation, job allocation, or social justice. What we always get with leftist ideology, whether it's called progressivism, social democracy, or some other idiotic euphemism for totalitarianism, is a dangerously deluded system that rejects any kind of natural hierarchy. But if we've learned anything from the socialist revolutions of the 20th century, it should be that hierarchy among human groups is inevitable, so better that it's based on merit. Even if people believe they're creating an egalitarian utopia, the wicked will find some way to designate pecking order and some way for the worst to rise to the top in the absence of stringent limits to power. What progressivism really stands for is the use of coercion to deny human nature, be it race and sex, the nuclear family, how absolute power corrupts, or that only by protecting natural freedom is there any point in civilization. This is Rocky Mystery, over and out.